At the end of Act 3, we saw Juliet asking her nurse for advice, and her nurse told her that it would be better for her just to forget Romeo and to marry Paris, to obey her father. And at that point, Juliet, secretly, without telling her, kind of cut ties with the nurse. And although she pretends to do what the nurse recommends, in her heart, she is ready to do something desperate. She's thinking about suicide, but she pretends to go to mass with Friar Lawrence, pretending that's because she has repented of her disobedience to her father, but actually it's because she wants Friar Lawrence's advice, because she's so desperate. So when she goes to Friar Lawrence, she meets Paris, who is there arranging or trying to arrange the wedding with Friar Lawrence. And Friar Lawrence kind of equivocates. He says that he doesn't like the idea because Paris doesn't know whether Juliet is willing yet. But when Juliet arrives, she kind of pretends with Paris, so she doesn't outright say no, but she says a lot of things that the audience know refer to Romeo, but Paris thinks they refer to him. So he says, "Thy face is mine," and she says, "It may be so, for it is not mine own." So she's talking about Romeo. So you've got that dramatic irony where it's emphasising to us how devoted she is to Romeo. And then, so with Friar Lawrence, Juliet basically threatens to commit suicide if he won't help her. So because of that, because she's so desperate and threatening suicide, Friar Lawrence has a plan which he says will require a lot of daring, a lot of bravery to do. And Juliet lists lots of extreme things that she would rather do than marry Paris. So she talks about leaping off the battlements, being locked up in a charnel house, a house full of the bones of dead people. And she says that she would do any number of things that, to hear them told, have made me tremble, and I will do it without fear or doubt. So things that just listening to the idea of made her tremble before, but now she will do them without fear or doubt. So it just shows the power of Juliet's love, how much she has changed from this obedient, cautious young woman at the beginning. And now there's a sense that love has transformed her, and to some extent love has empowered her, that she is active and brave. So Friar Lawrence's plan is that he will give Juliet a liquid that will give all the appearances of death. So it'll make her look as though she's dead, and everyone will think that she's dead, but she won't be. She'll just be in a deep sleep. And then her family will take her to their tomb, the monument, the tomb of the Capulets, and that Friar Lawrence will send a letter to Romeo via another friar, and that then Romeo will come to the tomb and get her and take her away. Which again is quite an extreme plan, but because she's so desperate, that's what Friar Lawrence says, and Juliet agrees to that very courageously. Then, so Act 4, Scene 2, I haven't put it on here because it's mostly the servants preparing for the feast, and then Juliet comes home and she pretends to repent her disobedience to her father, and Lord Capulet says he's going to go to Paris and agree that they'll marry the next day, tomorrow. So they're preparing for the wedding, but obviously because of the dramatic irony, we know that Juliet is planning to fake her own death. So there's that contrast between their happiness that she is suddenly obedient again, and our knowledge that she is not going to be obedient, that she's planning something really extreme. Then Act 4, Scene 3. So that is Juliet with the nurse and her mother, and they're preparing the wedding clothes. And then the nurse and her mother leave, and Juliet starts to have doubts, and she almost calls them back again, calls her mother and her nurse back to comfort her. But then she basically says that they can't do anything to help her, and she says, "My dismal scene, I needs must act alone." So again, it's showing how brave she's being, and that transformation that love has created. And how desperate she is as well to be with Romeo. And so she drinks the liquor, even after she's thought of all the things that could go wrong, and thinks about the possibility of waking up in the tomb and being afraid and all the things that could go wrong, but she still drinks it anyway, and she ends that saying, "Romeo, I come." So the idea that she does it for Romeo, that she's prepared to face all of these terrifying things for the sake of her love for Romeo, so showing again how strong that is. Then Act 4, Scene 4, again I haven't put it on here because it's quite short. It's the Capulets and the nurse preparing for the feast, and then Paris arriving with music. And it's important structurally because Paris arriving with music when we know that Juliet's just taken this potion to make it look like she's dead. So again, that dramatic irony where we know that they're about to find Juliet and think she's dead. They're going to have this distraught reaction, and we're waiting for that. Again, the contrast between something happy, Paris bringing music for his wedding day, and Juliet, who they're going to think is dead. So again, this idea that good turns to bad quickly. Then Act 4, Scene 5, this is when the nurse goes to wake Juliet for her wedding day and finds her apparently dead. They obviously think that she is dead. And Lord and Lady Capulet and the nurse are completely distraught. The nurse and Lady Capulet are kind of repeating things like, you know, she's dead, oh lamentable day. The idea is that they can't find any more words to express their grief, that it's so unexpected and shocking to them. And then Lady Capulet says, "My child, my only life," so implying that Juliet was absolutely everything to her. That now that Juliet is dead, everything is gone. And Lord Capulet similarly saying, "Death is my son-in-law, death is my heir," saying that that basically everything is over for him now, that death inherits everything he has, meaning that everything's come to nothing. And that's obviously contrasting quite strongly with the last time we saw Lord and Lady Capulet with Juliet, when Lady Capulet said, "I have done with thee." Lord Capulet called her baggage. Was, from a modern perspective, abusive to her. And this idea that they don't realise what they had until it's gone, that it takes something so serious for them to realise how petty and insignificant their conflict was. And in a sense kind of foreshadowing the very end when Juliet will die and they will have those similar feelings and feel that they've kind of sacrificed their daughter for nothing. But the idea that they don't realise until it's too late to do anything about it. But Friar Lawrence, so he says that Juliet's gone to heaven, and he talks about the wedding that they should prepare for the funeral. Obviously, he knows that she's not dead and he wants to get her in the tomb, because that's where Romeo is supposed to be taking her from. And Capulet talks about our wedding cheer to a sad burial feast has changed, and says that all things change them to the contrary. So again, this idea of good things turning to bad very quickly, and this idea of that duality of there being good in bad, but also bad in good. And then we've got a little bit of a scene at the end with the servants and the musicians, and there's a sense that that's kind of comic relief, that they're joking, which we see throughout really with the servants. Arguably the comic relief is kind of a break from the tragedy to kind of give you a chance to recover, but arguably the comic scenes then heighten the tragedy because of that contrast. So when you have a light scene and then an even darker scene afterwards, it makes you feel even more the tragedy of that scene afterwards. But also the idea that the musicians that came for the wedding are now going to be the musicians for the funeral. So again, this idea of something good turning to something bad so quickly, the idea that happiness doesn't always last, that good things turn to bad sometimes.